costs of war. So welcome. Before we get started, I just have a few brief announcements. First, I see some new faces here, which is great. We welcome everyone. If you're interested, I'm going to pass around this email sign-up list if you'd like to receive weekly updates on our club. If you're interested, sign up. If not, just pass it around. I'll start over here.
Yeah.
And also, we have some exciting upcoming events for the rest of February. Next week, we're going to be playing a game of Libertarian Jeopardy, where we're going to have a Jeopardy game with libertarian-esque questions. It's going to be here on Wednesday night, 7 p.m., same place. And then after that, the next week after that, on the 23rd, we're going to have our second general discussion entitled Freedom and Foreign Policy, which will be led by Jim Allen right here. And it's going to be about what is the proper foreign policy approach to take in the freedom and the liberty-oriented philosophy. So it's a lot of fun. I encourage you all to come to our general meetings. They're completely open. And so without further ado, I will now introduce Mr. David Henderson. David R. Henderson is a professor at the Naval Postgraduate School and a research fellow with the Hoover Institution. He is the author of The Joy of Freedom, an Economist Odyssey, and editor of the Concise Encyclopedia of Economics. His articles have appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Fortune, the Christian Science Monitor, Reason, and many other publications. He has also appeared on the O'Reilly Factor, CNN, the Jim Lehrer Newshour, and the John Stossel Show. He has also testified before various committees of U.S. Congress. The title of Professor Henderson's talk tonight is The Cost of War. So without further ado, Mr. Professor David R. Henderson.
Thanks, Casey, and thank you all. You know, it's wonderful to see young people. I don't see them very often. My daughter's 26. She left home a few years ago to go to college, and now she has a job. The officers, I teach military officers, and the median age of those officers is probably about 31, and they typically have families. And so I just don't get the energy of young people. And it was just, I picked it up just going around campus, just crossing the campus. It was great. And I was reminiscing with Casey and the others I was walking with, Charlie and Jim, right? And others, about how I did give a talk here once before anyone but you were born, I think. It was in October or November, October, November 1979, and there was a serious effort in the U.S. Congress to reintroduce military conscription. And I had testified against it before Senator Sam Nunn the previous May. And meanwhile, I moved out here in the summer to work at the Cato Institute, which it was in San Francisco at the time. That's where it started. And I gave a talk on the draft that was pretty well received. So that was kind of neat. So my talk today is titled The Costs of War. When I sat down to outline the talk, I realized very quickly that it's about more than just the costs of war. It's really about the cost of an interventionist foreign policy. So let me ask some questions. Who here has traveled on a commercial airline in the last few years? Please raise your hand. So I would say at least half, probably 60, 70%. Okay. Does someone care to tell the rest of the people, maybe people who haven't traveled, what you do between the time you get to the airport and you get to your gate for your flight? Anyone care to share that? William? Yes?
Security theater.
Security theater, and you've had some experience with it? What'd you do?
They took off my shoes and ran it through a spectrometer for half an hour.
Half an hour, okay. Okay. Anyone else?
They patted down my full-length skirt. Never wear a full-length skirt, girls. They patted all the way down.
What month was that? Roughly.
Once in November, and then...
Yeah, so after they introduced the new stuff. Yes?
I got full freedom fondle.
Until they caught resistance? Is that the term? That's the term. So you kind of have a feel, pardon me, you have an idea of what it's like. Okay? Now let me ask another question. raise your hand if you would like the government to be able to monitor your phone calls from people in other countries. You do? You do? Raise your hand if you would like the government not to monitor your phone calls. Okay? Let me ask another one. Who here wants government officials to be able to write you a national security letter demanding certain information without a warrant? So the FBI official can just come and write a letter saying, give us this information, and doesn't need a warrant. So he essentially is being his own judge. Who would like to have the government have that power? Raise your hand. And who here would like the government not to have that power? Okay. Now, if you could choose to change a U.S. government policy so that the threat from terrorists would be less, you can never make it zero, but it would be less. And if changing that policy cut government spending by over $300 billion a year, which is roughly 20% of the deficit, and if changing that policy meant the government wouldn't frisk us or take nude pictures of us in airports. I haven't had the frisk yet, but I've had the naked picture a couple of times. Would you want to change that policy? Raise your hand if you wouldn't want to change that policy. So you can change a policy, and it can get rid of all that stuff. Raise your hand if you wouldn't want to change that policy. Raise your hand if you would want to change the policy. Okay. Well, tonight what I'm going to do is lay out why I think U.S. foreign policy has cost us a lot of money, a lot of our freedoms, and has also made us less safe. I'll also say why I think an economist who's a strong believer in economic freedom, someone like me, can add a lot of insight to the discussion of war and foreign policy. Oh, I left you out. You probably were alive when I testified. I didn't see you. Had a lot of insight to war and foreign policy. And finally, I'll say why I think libertarians are uniquely positioned to be leaders in the anti-war movement. I've been an economist over half my life, essentially almost all my adult life. And the more I've learned, the more I've seen what a powerful insight economist Ludwig von Mises had over 60 years ago, when he pointed out that one government intervention leads to problems that can be eliminated if the intervention is eliminated. But the governments tend, when they see the problem, to add another intervention, which leads to more problems, and then they have more interventions, and so on. So, and the term we use in economics is unintended consequences. So, for example, Nixon in 1971 imposed price controls on the whole economy. And in 1973, OPEC got powerful and used their power to raise the price of oil from $3 a barrel to $11 a barrel within a few months. Those price controls on oil and gasoline prevented the price from rising to the full free market price, and we lined up for gasoline. So talk to your parents, most of you, and you'll hear stories about how long they took to get gasoline. So the government could have eliminated those price controls. Nixon didn't, Ford didn't. Instead, they said, people are energy pigs. They're using oil as if it's cheap. Well, it was cheap. They kept it artificially cheap. So instead of eliminating the price controls, let's impose fuel economy standards on cars. And President Ford's big initiative was something called the CAFE laws, corporate average fuel economy, to require that cars get a certain number of miles per gallon. That was an outgrowth of the price controls. One of the unintended consequences of that was that the auto companies, in order to get gas mileage up, cut the weight of a car by hundreds of pounds. And all of the things equal, a lighter car is more dangerous than a heavier car. And so there were thousands of extra deaths a year on the roads because of that law.